Night has always been a place of shadows, and in the deep past, long before the comfort of lamps and locked doors, it was a realm of danger. Imagine a figure, small against the vast horizon of the African savanna, crouched close to a flicker of fire. The flames are weak, snapping and sputtering in the wind, a fragile barrier against the expanse of darkness beyond. All around, the night hums with unseen life, hyenas circling, lions padding silently, insects buzzing in a chaotic chorus. The air is cool, carrying the scent of dust and grass, and the stars stretch endlessly overhead. The figure trembles, clutching a stick pulled from the flames, its end glowing with uncertain light. This is not yet humanity as we know it. This is one of our ancestors, thin, vulnerable, and ill-prepared for the threats that surround them. By every measure of survival, they should not have lasted, and yet somehow they did. We often think of human beings as conquerors of the world, but the truth is that our beginning was anything but triumphant. In those early days, survival was not guaranteed. If anything, it seemed impossibly out of reach. Our ancestors were slower than the predators they faced. They lacked the teeth and claws of the big cats. Their skin was bare, offering no thick coat against cold nights or biting winds. Their infants were helpless for years, far longer than the offspring of most other animals. Every aspect of their existence spoke of fragility, and yet, despite the odds, despite all the reasons they should have disappeared into the long silence of extinction, they endured. What was it like, then, to live in that first chapter of human history? Picture the grasslands stretching far and wide, broken only by scattered trees and winding rivers. Herds of gazelle and antelope moved restlessly, prey for the powerful predators who prowled in the tall grass. Elephants and rhinoceroses left deep prints in the earth, reminders of the scale of life around them. For our ancestors, it was a world of giants, some that could feed them, others that could end them in an instant. To walk into the open was to risk being seen. To linger in the dark was to risk being hunted. And yet, something small but extraordinary was happening around those flickering fires. It was not strength that kept the predators at bay, but cooperation. It was not claws that gave our fragile ancestors a chance, but curiosity. Their survival depended not on what they were born with, but on what they could imagine. Consider that lonely figure again, crouching by the fire. They are not truly alone. Behind them, huddled in the dim circle of light, others wait. Children pressed against their mothers, hunters nursing wounds, the elderly whispering stories that will outlast them. Already, even in these earliest moments, humanity is not the story of the individual, but of the group. One person may tremble, but together they are a force that will resist extinction. When a predator's eyes glint at the edge of the dark, it is not the fire alone that holds it back. It is the combined voices, the sticks waved in unison, the sharp stones ready to fly. Still, the dangers were overwhelming. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with the sound of prowling beasts. Days brought blistering heat, hunger, and the constant search for water. There were no permanent shelters, only caves or temporary lean-tos built of branches and leaves. Illness could sweep through a group, carrying away the old and the young. Injuries from hunts or accidents often meant death, for there were no medicines, no healing herbs beyond what instinct and chance provided. And yet, the record of bones and tools buried deep in the earth tells us they persisted. They did not vanish. The mystery then begins here. How did such a fragile beginning become the foundation of our survival? Why did creatures who lacked every obvious advantage not only survive, but eventually thrive, spreading across continents, adapting to deserts, forests, and frozen tundras? The answer is not simple, and it cannot be explained by strength alone. Instead, it lies in the strange mixture of vulnerability and adaptability, in the tension between weakness and resilience. Imagine again the circle of fire. A child stirs restlessly, pointing upward at the stars. A parent soothes them, murmuring softly. In that gesture, in that moment of care, something revolutionary is happening. For to keep alive a child so helpless, so dependent, requires patience and foresight. It requires planning for a future not yet visible. That simple act of nurture, repeated across generations, became one of the great engines of survival. Care was as powerful as teeth. Compassion became a shield, but care alone was not enough. There was also fear, the sharp edge that drove vigilance. Every sound in the night was a warning. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant roar of a lion. Fear sharpened the senses, kept the group close, and forced them to innovate. If fire faltered, they rekindled it. If predators learned their patterns, they moved. Fear, often seen as weakness, became another survival tool. It taught caution, it demanded awareness, and it forged unity. Over the centuries, these fragile beginnings stretched into patterns of survival. Small bands moved slowly, following herds, seeking water, testing the boundaries of their world. They were wanderers, carrying little, relying on memory and instinct. The world they entered was immense, filled with landscapes that dwarfed them, rivers that cut the earth into canyons, forests that hid dangers, deserts that threatened thirst. And through it all, they endured. Archaeologists who study this time find scattered traces. A stone flake sharpened for cutting, a charred bone cracked for marrow, footprints preserved in ancient mud. Each trace whispers the same story. These fragile ancestors were there, moving forward one step at a time against all odds. Every artifact is a testament to survival, not through dominance, but through persistence. It is humbling to think of how close they lived to the edge of extinction. A failed hunt could mean starvation. A drought could scatter entire groups. A single predator attack might wipe out a family line. The fragility of their existence was constant, and yet fragility did not break them. In some paradoxical way, it may have been the very thing that forced their adaptability. Because they were not strong enough to stand alone, they learned to stand together. Because they could not overpower the world, they learned to read it, to understand it, to use it. When we look back on these beginnings, we are reminded that survival is not always the story of the strongest. Sometimes it is the story of the ones who find meaning in fear, who turn weakness into cooperation, who kindle fire against the darkness and refuse to let it die. This was the fragile beginning of humanity, a chapter that by every account should have ended in silence. And yet, from those trembling figures around the fire, the first whispers of a different destiny emerged. The savannah night lingers in imagination. The stars, the fire, the circle of weary figures. They were not conquerors. They were not mighty. They were fragile, uncertain, and afraid. But they endured, and in that endurance lies the opening mystery of our species, the paradox that we, who should not have survived, did. And from here, the story unfolds. The fire flickers low, and in its faint glow, the grass ripples like an ocean under the breath of night winds. Beyond that fragile circle of light, the savannah belongs to others. Eyes shine briefly in the dark, watchful, patient, and unblinking. The truth is that for most of our prehistory, humans were not the hunters. They were the hunted, and all around them, the world teemed with predators far larger, faster, and deadlier than anything we fear today. Imagine stepping barefoot into that ancient landscape. The earth is warm underfoot, still holding the heat of the day, but the air carries the scent of danger, musky, acrid, metallic. Somewhere close, a lion's deep cough rattles the silence. From the east, the eerie laughter of hyenas echoes across the plains. And if you listen closely, beneath these familiar sounds lurks another, a rasping growl belonging to a predator long gone from the modern world, the saber-toothed cat. With its massive fangs, sharp enough to puncture the thick hides of mammoths, it was a terror our ancestors would have known well. To be small, slow, and fragile in such a place was to live on a knife's edge. Each moment of carelessness could be the last. For the predators of that age were not simply larger than modern animals. They were more numerous, their ranges broader, their hunger unending. Consider the saber-tooth. Powerful shoulders, jaws designed for a killing strike, and a body built to ambush. A single swipe of its paw could crush bone. Unlike modern lions, these cats were not content with hunting only the weakest prey. They could and did challenge creatures many times their size. For our ancestors, to stumble across one in the grass was to face almost certain death. No wooden spear, no stone flake could truly match that strength. The only defense was distance, vigilance, and fire. And if the cats prowled the grasslands, the hyenas ruled the night. Not the smaller spotted scavengers we know today, but giants, hyenas the size of bears, with jaws strong enough to snap an elephant's femur in half. They hunted in packs, cunning and relentless, able to run for long distances until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. Imagine the terror of hearing their laughter rise from the darkness, knowing it was not mirth but the signal of pursuit. For a small group of humans, weighed down with children and belongings, there could be no outrunning them. The only hope was to huddle together, to brandish firebrands, to pray the beasts would hesitate just long enough to find easier prey. And the lions. Yes, lions roam too, though not the lions we picture now. These were cave lions, among the largest felines to ever walk the earth. Some stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, massive predators that stalked across Eurasia. To our ancestors who wandered into Europe's colder reaches, the threat was constant. To leave a cave was to risk meeting eyes glowing amber in the snow light. But predators were not the only enemies. The climate itself conspired against survival. During the long sweep of the ice ages, glaciers advanced and retreated, reshaping entire continents. Imagine a sudden drop in temperature that lasted not a day or a year, but centuries. Forests withered into barren plains. Rivers shrank to trickles. Entire herds of animals migrated away, leaving emptiness behind. For humans, already precariously balanced between hunger and survival, such shifts were devastating. To live through them meant enduring bitter winds, endless hunger, and the slow gnawing of despair. It is worth pausing here to truly consider the scale of these odds. Predators at every turn, climates that shifted without mercy, landscapes that could change faster than traditions could adapt. Against this backdrop, early humans were small, fragile, and painfully mortal. Their bones tell the story clearly. Fractures from attacks, teeth marks where predators feasted, skeletons of children who did not reach adulthood. Archaeologists uncover these remains and know survival was the exception, not the rule. And yet, it is in this contrast between human fragility and the immense strength of their enemies that the miracle of survival becomes most vivid. For while the saber-tooth had claws, it could not weave rope to trap prey. While the giant hyena had jaws of steel, it could not share a fire, teach a child, or plan a migration route. And while the cave lion had unmatched strength, it could not imagine, could not dream, could not tell a story that united the living and the dead. Still, the danger was omnipresent. Picture a scene at dusk, a small band crossing open grassland, children carried on hips, bundles of food balanced on shoulders. They are exposed, vulnerable. Behind them, vultures circle low, drawn by the scent of meat from a successful hunt. But vultures are not the only followers. In the tall grass, shadows move. A pack of hyenas, patient, waiting for fatigue. The humans quicken their pace, nerves stretched taut. The sun dips lower, and the first laugh carries across the plain. Fear rises like a tide. They clutch their sticks, ready to spark fire if they must. They do not know if they will see morning. Or imagine a cave high in the limestone cliffs of Ice Age Europe. A family has taken refuge, the entrance darkened by firelight. But in the snow outside, enormous prints appear. Broad paws press deep into the powder. The lions are close. A roar breaks the silence, echoing off the rocks, vibrating in the chests of the frightened. The cave offers safety, but it is not impregnable. The humans know this. Their fire burns hotter, their voices louder, trying to create the illusion of strength. But inside, hearts race, and every soul wonders if the next breath will be their last. Such moments must have been countless, repeated across millennia. And every time, the odds were against survival. We often imagine ancient humans as natural hunters, but the reality is humbler, more precarious. For every successful hunt, there were nights of going hungry. For every triumph, there were losses, lives cut short by predators, cold, or accident. Survival was not a steady climb, but a fragile balancing act, constantly threatened by forces beyond control. And yet, here is the mystery again, they endured. Not because they could outrun the hyena or outfight the lion, but because they found ways to exist in spite of them. They tracked, they waited, they learned to understand the patterns of predators. They chose when to move, when to hide, when to fight, and when to flee. And slowly, over generations, their knowledge accumulated. Weakness became strategy. Fear became wisdom. The predators, after all, had their own limitations. A saber-toothed cat, as powerful as it was, could starve when prey grew scarce. A giant hyena could not adapt to climate shifts that altered its hunting grounds. The very strength that made them terrifying also made them inflexible. Humans, by contrast, had adaptability carved into their very existence. They were forced to bend, and by bending, they did not break. This is the paradox of enemies everywhere. The greater the danger, the sharper the survival instincts grew. To face lions meant to build stronger fires. To face hyenas meant to move in tighter groups. To face the Ice Age meant to imagine shelters, to stitch furs together, to follow herds across vast distances. Every enemy forced an answer, and with each answer, fragile humans grew less fragile. So we return to the image of the fire on the savannah, flames licking upward into the night. Around it, a circle of figures huddle, weary, hungry, but alive. Beyond the predator's weight, eyes glittering in the dark. The odds are against them. Every calculation says they should not endure. And yet, As dawn breaks, the predators slip back into the shadows, and the humans rise once more, continuing their journey into an uncertain future. In a world filled with enemies, they survived, not because they were stronger, but because they were human. When we picture the dangers of the ancient world, it is easy to imagine a contest of strength. Claws against fists, teeth against bone, speed against speed. By such measures, the fragile human ancestor was destined to lose. But survival is not always decided in contests of raw power. Sometimes it is determined in ways that are less obvious, ways that slip beneath the notice of predators and storms. For what our ancestors lacked in muscle, they carried in something else. A peculiar edge that was not carved into bone or sharpened into tooth, but rooted deep in their minds and in their bonds with one another. It was an edge born of curiosity, an edge forged in cooperation, an edge shaped by adaptability. Imagine again the flickering firelight, a circle of weary figures pressed close against the cold. A child coughs softly, restless in the night. One of the adults leans down, picking up a burning branch and placing more wood onto the flames. But instead of letting the fire simply smolder, they experiment, adding dried grass first, then twigs, then heavier logs. They notice how certain woods burn longer, how damp sticks sputter and smoke. The act is small, but it is driven by a question. What makes the fire last? That quiet curiosity, unremarkable in the moment, will ripple outward across generations, transforming a fragile camp into a force that predators fear. Curiosity was dangerous, yes, for it led people to stray from safety, to test the unknown. But it was also vital. Where a predator repeated its instincts, humans asked questions. What lies over that ridge? Which roots can be eaten? How might a stone be shaped to cut more cleanly? Each question was a thread, and together they wove a fabric of survival. Alongside curiosity came cooperation. No one person alone could withstand the dangers of the world. A solitary figure on the savannah would not last a week, but together, huddled in groups, humans began to turn weakness into strength. Picture a hunt, not of strength, but of strategy. A group gathers at dawn, eyes scanning the horizon. They whisper softly, pointing to the trails of antelope in the dust. Alone, none of them could bring down such swift prey, but together they plan. One group will drive the herd toward a ravine. Another will wait with stones and spears. When the signal comes, shouts ring out across the plain. Arms wave, dust rises, and panic spreads through the herd. Animals scatter, some escaping, but one stumbles into the trap. For the first time, the humans do not go hungry, and they do not feast alone. They share, the hunters, the mothers, the children, even the elders who can no longer chase, all gather around the fire to eat. That sharing was not only kindness, it was survival. By feeding one another, they kept the group whole. By protecting the young, they ensured a future. By honoring the old, they preserved memory and wisdom. No saber-toothed cat, no lion, no hyena could match such cooperation. They fought as individuals. Humans survived as a community, and then there was adaptability. Perhaps the most unexpected edge of all. To watch a storm approach, to feel the sudden change of seasons, to face the empty plains where herds had once been. These were trials that could break a rigid creature. But humans learned to bend. Picture a group approaching a river that has dried into cracked mud. Thirst claws at their throats. Children cry, and panic threatens. But instead of despair, they search. They dig with sharpened sticks. They follow the tracks of animals. They learn to store water in skins. When the world shifted, they shifted too. In frozen lands, they stitched furs together with bone needles. In deserts, they traveled by night. In forests, they fashioned tools to cut and climb. Each environment demanded a new response, and they gave it. Not perfectly, not always swiftly, but enough. And enough was the difference between extinction and survival. The psychological tools of fear and memory also played their part. Consider the moment a predator strikes, screams, chaos, blood on the grass. A child survives, trembling, eyes wide. That memory will not fade. It will be told and retold by the fire. Do not go to the river at dusk, for the lions wait there. In this way, fear became teaching. Trauma became survival. The predators could not pass down warnings beyond instinct. But humans carried stories, living maps of danger etched into words and gestures. There is something almost fragile about this edge, for it rests not on certainty, but on imagination. It requires asking, what if? What if the herd runs this way? What if the winter comes early? What if the fire dies? Such questions may sound small, but they transformed a trembling band of primates into survivors. Curiosity pushed them into danger. but it also revealed solutions. Cooperation bound them in trust, turning weakness into shared resilience. Adaptability let them bend with storms instead of breaking. Consider again a night on the savannah. Hyenas circle, their laughter shrill in the dark. The humans know they cannot outrun them. Alone, they would be lost. But together they stand, waving burning branches, shouting in unison. Their voices merge, their fear transforms into defiance. For a moment, the pack hesitates, and that hesitation is enough. The humans live to see dawn. It is not strength that saved them, it is unity. Or picture a bitter winter, snow falling endlessly, food scarce. The band gathers in a cave, their breaths misting in the air. Hunger gnaws at them, but one woman remembers how marrow can be cracked from bones, yielding fat and nourishment. Another recalls the trail of reindeer herds far to the south. They decide to risk the journey, carrying fire with them, huddling close against the wind. Step by step, they move through the whiteness, guided by memory and hope. And eventually, they find what they seek. These moments, multiplied across millennia, became the pattern of survival. Not by accident, but by choice. Not through dominance, but through fragile persistence. And there is another layer still, the ability to see beyond the present. To imagine tomorrow, when they planted seeds of fire in the ashes each night, they were thinking of the next morning. When they buried their dead, they were thinking of what comes after life. That sense of future, of continuity, gave purpose. It gave them reason to endure, even when the odds screamed otherwise. The predators that ruled their nights have vanished into fossils. The climates that tormented them have shifted into history. But the edge our ancestors found remains. It is written into us. The urge to ask, to connect, to adapt. Every time we light a fire, every time we share a meal, every time we imagine something better, we echo that fragile inheritance. So while the saber-toothed cat had its fangs, and the hyena its crushing jaws, our ancestors held something invisible, yet far more enduring. They carried curiosity that pushed them toward discovery, cooperation that bound them in strength, adaptability that kept them alive when the world turned hostile. It was this edge, unexpected, intangible, that tipped the balance of survival. The world was filled with enemies, but in their minds, in their bonds, and in their resilience, humans discovered their advantage. Not an obvious advantage, not one written on their bones, but one powerful enough to change the fate of an entire species. From the fragile circle of fire to the vast migrations across continents, it was this edge that carried them forward. And as dawn rose over the savannah once more, our ancestors, small and trembling, rose with it, armed not with claws, but with imagination. The wind howls across a frozen plain, carrying with it a spray of snow and shards of ice. The land is pale and endless, a canvas of white broken only by jagged stone and the black silhouettes of leafless trees. Somewhere in the distance, the muffled crack of ice echoes across a valley, the sound of a glacier shifting in its slow, relentless march. This is Ice Age Europe, a world caught in the grip of winters so severe they lasted not for a season, but for generations. Step into that world for a moment. The air is so cold it burns the lungs. Every breath crystallizes into clouds that vanish instantly in the gale. The ground is hard as stone, frozen solid beneath layers of ice. There is no soft grass to rest upon, no fruit hanging heavy on trees, no easy prey grazing idly. Food is scarce, and every step carries the weight of hunger. Darkness lingers, for in winter the sun hangs low and feeble, casting long shadows across the snow. For early humans wandering this landscape, survival was not simply a challenge. It was a daily defiance of extinction. Imagine a small group huddled in a cave, its mouth half blocked by snowdrifts. Inside, the air is thick with smoke from a fire that struggles against the damp. Children whimper, their faces pale, their small hands hidden beneath scraps of fur. Adults crouch closer to the flames, adjusting the logs, coaxing sparks to life, feeding the fragile light with breath and patience. The fire is everything. Without it, the cave is no refuge but a tomb of ice. The winters of the Ice Age were not like modern winters, brief and predictable. These were long epochs where cold dominated entire continents, carving mountains with glaciers, draining seas into ice sheets that reached thousands of feet thick. Temperatures could plummet for centuries. Animals migrated south, rivers froze, and forests withered. For humans, whose bodies were made for warmer climates, the cold was an almost impossible enemy. Clothing became more than protection. It became a lifeline. Picture a woman squatting by the fire, threading sinew through bone needles, sewing hides together into a rough coat. The smell of tanned leather hangs in the air, mixed with smoke and sweat. She pulls the garment tightly around a child, fastening it with strips of hide. It is not elegant, not comfortable, but it shields against the worst of the wind. Each stitch is an act of survival. Each layer of fur a barrier between fragile skin and the merciless cold. And fire itself became not only warmth but permanence. Our ancestors learned to carry embers in bundles of moss, wrapped carefully so they would smolder through long migrations. They struck sparks from stone, practiced again and again until skill became instinct. Around the fire, they gathered not just for warmth, but for life itself. Fire dried their clothes, cooked their food, hardened their spears. It kept the dark at bay, the predators distant, the despair of the endless cold slightly more bearable. Shelters, too, tell the story of survival. Archaeologists uncovered traces of huts built from mammoth bones, covered with hides, weighted with stones. Imagine entering such a shelter. Ribs arched into walls, skulls serving as supports. The entire structure creaking beneath the wind, but standing strong against the storm. Within, smoke curls upward through a hole in the roof. Families sleep shoulder to shoulder, pressed close for warmth. Outside, the blizzard screams. Inside, there is at least the illusion of safety. But the winters pressed hard, and safety was fragile. Hunger was a constant companion. The great herds of reindeer and bison moved unpredictably, sometimes vanishing entirely for weeks or months. Hunters tracked them across frozen valleys, leaving trails of footprints in snow that filled again with every gust. A failed hunt meant days of gnawing hunger, bellies swollen with emptiness. Bones were cracked open for marrow, hides boiled into broth. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be spared. Picture a hunt in the dead of winter. A group of men and women wrapped in furs creep silently across the snow. Their breath clouds the air, their spears tipped with stone. Ahead, a herd of reindeer moves sluggishly, their coats heavy with frost, their movements slow with exhaustion. The humans wait, hidden, watching for the weakest animal. Then, with a cry, they rush forward, driving the herd into panic. Spears fly, bodies crash, snow churns beneath the stampede. At last, one reindeer falls, thrashing, then still. The hunters gather quickly, slicing with stone blades, wrapping the meat in hides, carrying it home. Tonight, their families will eat. For a brief moment, the hunger will ease. Yet even in success, the spectre of scarcity remained. The cold consumed calories faster than food could replace them. The constant labor of building, sewing, hunting, and traveling drained the body. Sickness spread quickly in cramped shelters. Frostbite took fingers and toes. Infants were particularly vulnerable, their small bodies unable to fight the chill. Death was a frequent visitor in those caves and huts, and grief must have been as common as breath. And still, despite all this, survival persisted. Not perfectly, not without cost, but persist it did. For humans had learned to think beyond the immediate, to imagine solutions where none seemed possible. They learned to follow the patterns of the herds, to build traps and pits, to stockpile food when the chance arose. They learned to chip flint into blades sharper than teeth, to fashion spear throwers that hurled weapons farther and with more force. Innovation became their weapon against the cold. Perhaps most remarkable of all was their ability to find meaning even in the harshest winters. Deep within caves, far from the biting wind, torchlight flickered across walls painted with animals. Bison, horses, mammoths, etched and coloured with ochre and charcoal. Imagine the scene. Families gathered in the glow, children staring wide-eyed as images danced across stone. In a world of hunger and fear, they still created beauty. They still told stories. It was as if imagination itself became a second fire, one that burned within, keeping despair at bay. Contrast is at the heart of this chapter. Outside, the endless storm, the biting cold, the threat of extinction. Inside, the fragile glow of fire, the quiet hum of voices, the ingenuity of hands sewing, building, and shaping. Humanity teetered on the edge of disappearance, and yet by finding ways to bend without breaking, they endured. Consider the predators of that age, mighty as they were. Saber-toothed cats, cave lions, woolly rhinos. Many did not survive the changing climate. Their strength, once an advantage, became a trap when the world shifted. But humans, fragile as they were, survived precisely because they were not fixed. They could change. They could imagine. They could adapt. So when we think of the harshest winters, we must not see only suffering, though there was plenty of it. We must also see the resilience, the ingenuity, the quiet defiance that burned in the hearts of our ancestors. They should not have survived. The cold should have silenced them. Hunger should have ended their story. But in fire, in clothing, in shelters of bone and hide, in the bonds of community and the spark of imagination, they found ways to continue. Picture the cave once more. Outside, snow falls endlessly, covering the world in silence. The wind moans through the valleys, carrying the cries of wolves. But inside, the fire crackles softly. Shadows dance on the walls. A mother hums to her child, rocking them gently beneath the layers of fur. An elder stirs the fire, watching sparks rise into the smoke. Around them, others sleep, breathing in unison, their lives bound together against the storm. They are fragile, yes. They are hungry, cold, and afraid. But they are alive. And in the deep heart of winter, that alone is victory. This was the harshest test, the crucible of survival. And out of it emerged not extinction, but endurance. The winters did not end humanity. They shaped it. They forged resilience in fire and ice. And from those caves, from those shelters of bone and fur, our ancestors would one day step into a warmer dawn, carrying with them the memory of endurance. The harshest winters remind us that survival is not about conquering the world, but about weathering it, not about defeating every enemy, but about refusing to yield. Against all odds, in the coldest darkness, the human story continued. The night is still. A pale moon drifts above a forest of ancient pines, their needles whispering in the cold wind. Beneath them, a small fire glows, its flames licking upward, its smoke curling into the dark. Around it sit a handful of humans, their eyes darting to the shadows beyond the firelight. For they know they are not alone. The forest is shared. Somewhere out there, in the deep black of the trees, another figure watches. Not beast, not quite the same as themselves, but something close. A rival, a cousin. For thousands of years, our ancestors were not the only humans on Earth. They were one branch of a family tree, crowded with cousins. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, perhaps others whose names we will never know. Each was shaped by time and evolution, strong in body, sharp in mind, uniquely adapted to their world. And yet they are gone. Their bones lie in caves, their tools rest buried in the soil. We remain, and so the question whispers through the ages. Why us? Why did our fragile line endure, while they, seemingly stronger, vanished into the shadows of history? Let us begin with the Neanderthals. Picture them on a cold steppe, a band of hunters crouched low against the wind. Their bodies are powerful, muscles packed thick beneath fur-lined hides. Their hands grip heavy spears with practiced ease. Their skulls are broad, their brows heavy, their eyes deep-set. To see one up close would be to feel both recognition and unease. They were human, but not our kind of human. Their strength surpassed ours. Their bones carried the marks of resilience, of lives filled with physical struggle and skill. Imagine them cornering a massive bison. With coordinated shouts, they thrust their spears forward, braving horns and hooves. The beast collapses, and with it, a feast is secured. They cut meat with stone blades, roast it over fire, share it among the group. Children laugh as they gnaw on scraps. Elders chew slowly, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. It is a scene of community, of survival, no less human than our own. And yet, for all their power, the Neanderthals are gone. Their world overlapped with ours for tens of thousands of years. There must have been encounters, sometimes violent, as rival groups fought over prey and territory. Sometimes intimate, as bodies came together, leaving echoes of their DNA still carried in our blood today. They were not monsters or myths. They were kin, and still their story ended while ours continued. Then there were the Denisovans. Their presence is a mystery, known not from skeletons or campsites, but from fragments, a tooth, a piece of bone, a genetic trace. They lived in the mountains of Asia, their bodies adapted to thin air and harsh conditions. Their DNA whispers of unions with our ancestors, of bonds that cross the boundaries of species. Some among us today, especially in parts of Oceania, still carry their legacy in our genes. Yet, like the Neanderthals, they too disappeared, leaving only shadows of memory in the deep layers of time. Why did this happen? Why did the stronger, the seemingly better equipped, fall away, while our fragile ancestors, thin and small, endured? The answer lies not in a single event, but in 1,000 small differences, a subtle accumulation of edges that tilted the balance of survival. Imagine a meeting in the wild. A group of Neanderthals stumbles upon a band of Homo sapiens at the edge of a river. Both groups eye each other warily. The Neanderthals, broad and imposing, grip their spears, confident in their strength. The Homo sapiens, slender, less imposing, stand behind their leader, whispering to one another. The air is heavy with tension. Will this end in violence or wary retreat? Neither side can know. Yet even here, even in this single encounter, the seeds of difference show. The Neanderthals may fight with raw power, but the Homo sapiens rely on numbers, on signals, on an unspoken bond of cooperation. They share information quickly, improvise together, adapt in the moment. Strength is visible. Adaptability is invisible, but often more decisive. Consider also the way stories spread. Our ancestors painted, carved, sang. They left behind not just tools, but symbols. A dot of ochre on stone, a handprint on a cave wall, a necklace of shells worn around a neck. These were not simply decorations. They were signs of shared identity, of belonging to something larger than the individual. To carry symbols was to say, we are one. Neanderthals and Denisovans may have had their own traditions, but the archaeological record suggests they were rarer, less widespread. And in a harsh, shifting world, the ability to create shared meaning, to unite scattered groups through story and symbol, was a survival tool as sharp as any spear. Another difference was scale. Neanderthals lived in smaller bands, close-knit but isolated. Our ancestors formed larger networks, trading goods and ideas across distances. Imagine two bands meeting at the edge of a valley, exchanging stone tools for hides, obsidian for shells. The gifts are more than objects. They are promises of alliance, of help when the hunt fails, of refuge in times of hunger. These invisible threads, woven across miles, created safety nets that Neanderthals never fully matched. And then there was the question of curiosity. Our ancestors wandered far, exploring coastlines, crossing deserts, daring to step beyond the familiar. They sought new hunting grounds, new waters to fish, new shelters to claim. Neanderthals and Denisovans, for all their strength, remained tied more closely to their home regions. When climates shifted, when resources dwindled, this difference mattered. The ones who ventured, who adapted, who looked to the horizon instead of the cave mouth, those were the ones who survived. Still, the end of our cousins was not a sudden vanishing. For thousands of years they lingered, sometimes blending with us, sometimes retreating, sometimes competing. Picture a lone Neanderthal, standing on a ridge, watching smoke rise from the valley below where Homo sapiens camp. He does not descend. He knows the land is changing, that his kind are fewer, that the strangers below are many. He turns back to his cave, to his dwindling people. He is not less intelligent, not less human. But history is not kind to equals. History favors those who find the edges, however small, and stack them until they become survival itself. The tale of the Neanderthals and Denisovans is not one of failure, but of inevitability. They thrived for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than our own line has yet existed. Their disappearance does not mark weakness. It marks the ruthless churn of time. And yet in their absence, our survival shines all the more strangely. For by all logic, it could have been otherwise. The stronger might have lasted. The fragile might have fallen. But the world does not bend to logic alone. Their shadows remain with us, in our DNA, in our bones, in the echoes of our imagination. Every time we tell their story, we call them back for a moment. These rivals in the shadows who walked beside us and then vanished, leaving us to wonder why. So why did we survive? Perhaps it was not strength, nor even intelligence, but the combination of traits: curiosity, cooperation, storytelling, adaptability, that together created resilience. A fragile creature clutching fire in the night, whispering warnings, singing songs, dreaming of tomorrow. That fragile creature endured, while the powerful cousins faded into silence. And so, when we sit by firelight today, when we tell stories of long ago, we are not just remembering our ancestors. We are remembering the others too. The Neanderthals, the Denisovans, the unseen rivals who shared the world with us. Their story is our story, entwined and unfinished. For in their shadows, we see ourselves more clearly, and in our survival, we carry the weight of their loss. In the end, our fragile line endured, not because it was destined, but because it was improbable. And perhaps that improbability is the heart of the mystery. We should not have survived, and yet we did. The cave is silent, except for the crackle of torches and the soft drip of water from stone above. A group of figures gathers deep within, far from the cold wind outside, their shadows stretching long across the uneven walls. The air is thick with smoke, the ground littered with ash. One of them lifts a hand, smeared with ochre, and presses it against the stone. When the hand is removed, a red silhouette remains, a mark that will outlast the hand itself, outlast the life that pressed it there. The torchlight flickers, and suddenly the cave wall seems alive with shapes. Horses racing, bison charging, mammoths lifting their tusks to the sky. This is not mere decoration, it is imagination made visible. To survive in the harsh Ice Age world, humans needed more than fire for warmth or spears for the hunt. They needed meaning. They needed stories. For without stories, the endless struggle of hunger and cold could consume not just the body, but the spirit. And so, in the deepest caves, by the faintest glow of fire, imagination became its own kind of flame, one that burned in the mind and refused to die. Close your eyes and picture those first artists. They crouch low, grinding minerals into powders, mixing them with fat or spit, dipping fingers or brushes of hair into the paste. Their torches cast trembling light, so that as they paint, the animals seem to move, to leap and run across the stone. Children gasp as the walls come alive. Elders chant softly, their voices echoing in the chamber, each note blending with the shapes on the wall. In this moment, survival is no longer just about food and shelter. It is about belonging to something larger, about making sense of a world that often seemed senseless. What we see in these caves is the birth of symbolic thought, a line of red dots, a spiral, a handprint, each a message, though its meaning is lost to us. Perhaps they were prayers for a successful hunt. Perhaps they were warnings. Perhaps they were simply expressions of wonder, the human need to capture beauty even in hardship. Whatever their purpose, they were proof of something extraordinary, the ability to imagine what was not there, to give form to the invisible. And this imagination was not idle play. It was a weapon against fear. Outside the caves lurked predators with fangs and claws, storms that howled for weeks, winters that swallowed entire valleys. Against such enemies, muscle and bone were weak defenses, but the ability to imagine, to tell a story about the world, to explain its dangers, to connect suffering to purpose, that gave fragile humans a shield no predator could pierce. Consider the ritual of gathering around fire. The flames flickered, casting familiar faces in gold and shadow. The night outside was filled with unseen threats, wolves circling in the dark, the distant roar of lions. Yet inside the circle of firelight, humans shared stories, perhaps of ancestors who hunted great beasts, of spirits who guarded the forest, of the sun that would return after the long winter night. These stories did not change the dangers, but they changed the mind. They replaced despair with courage, isolation with belonging. To sit by the fire and hear a story was to believe for a moment that survival was not just chance, but destiny. Anthropologists suggest that imagination, the ability to weave symbols and myths, may have been the greatest survival tool of all. It allowed scattered groups to share more than tools or food. They could share meaning. They could create identities that bound them together as clans, tribes, peoples. A painted handprint was more than a mark. It was a declaration. I was here. We were here. We belong to this place, and it belongs to us. Imagine a burial. A small child wrapped in fur, laid carefully in a shallow grave. Around the body are placed beads, tools, perhaps a carved figure. The earth is pressed down with solemn hands. The fire burns low, the air thick with grief. Why bury a child with ornaments, unless there was a belief, however faint, however fragile, that death was not an end, but a passage? The fire of imagination allowed humans to see beyond the horizon of life, to give shape to mysteries that might otherwise have crushed the heart. In that act, grief became ritual, and ritual became resilience. The contrast is striking. Other creatures faced fear and hunger with instinct. Humans faced them with imagination. Where an animal saw darkness, a human saw a stage for spirits. Where a predator's growl froze the blood, a story could transform it into a test of courage. By reshaping the world in their minds, our ancestors found strength to endure what their bodies could not. An imagination spread. Across continents, symbols appeared. Shells strung into necklaces far from the sea. Figures carved from ivory, their forms smoothed by countless hands. Stones arranged in circles, aligned to the movements of the sun and stars. Each of these speaks to a mind not satisfied with survival alone, but reaching for something more. For meaning, for connection, for beauty. It is easy, in the warmth of the present, to see cave art as quaint, as distant. But imagine the power of that first flicker of imagination. A painted horse on a wall was not just a horse, it was a promise. That the hunt would succeed, that the herd would return, that the hunger gnawing in the belly could one day be satisfied. A chant sung around the fire was not just sound, it was rhythm binding voices together, making many as one. In imagination, the fragile creature found a way to endure not just the world, but its own fear of the world. This was in many ways the first spark of culture. And culture, unlike strength or speed, could be passed on. A child who watched their mother paint or their father carve could one day do the same, adding their mark to the growing tapestry of human expression. In this way, imagination stretched across generations, a flame carried forward like embers smouldering in moss. It never truly died, because it lived in the stories, the rituals, the symbols that each generation passed to the next. Consider again the cave at Lascaux in France, its walls alive with animals. For thousands of years, those paintings remained hidden, preserved in darkness. When rediscovered, they revealed a world where imagination was already rich, already daring. It was not a slow awakening, but an explosion of creativity. This suggests that once the spark caught, it spread quickly, illuminating every corner of human life. Why does this matter for survival? Because imagination made cooperation possible on a larger scale. To believe in the same symbol, the same story, meant that strangers could act like kin. A clan could grow into a tribe could grow into a people. Shared myths became the glue that held larger groups together, making them stronger than any lone band of hunters could ever be. In a world of constant danger, numbers mattered. But numbers without unity were brittle. Numbers bound by story could endure anything. There is another layer still. Imagination not only explained the world but invited humans to dream of changing it. To see a mammoth painted on a wall was not only to recall the hunt, but to imagine the hunt's success. To carve a figure from bone was to imagine something beyond what nature had given. This ability to picture a world not yet real was the seed of invention. From it would grow new tools, new strategies, new ways of bending the world to human needs. And so, in the torchlit chambers of caves, we see more than art. We see the first flicker of everything that would follow: religion, science, literature, music. The human mind, restless and fragile, refused to settle for survival alone. It needed stories. It needed symbols. It needed imagination. Picture the scene once more. The cave is dark, the fire low, the walls are alive with painted forms. A child leans against their parent, eyes wide, listening to a story told in hushed tones. Outside, the wind howls, the wolves prowl, but inside, there is warmth and light and meaning. The fear is still there, but it has been reshaped, woven into the story, transformed into something bearable. In that moment, the fragile creature is no longer helpless. In that moment, imagination has given survival a soul. It is here, in the fire of imagination, that we find perhaps the greatest mystery of all. Muscles weaken, spears break, even fire can be extinguished. But a story, once told, can live on in the mind of another. It can leap across generations, across millennia, across entire worlds of change. And so, even when our ancestors faced winters that seemed endless, predators that seemed unstoppable, and hunger that seemed insatiable, they carried with them something no storm could erase: the fire of imagination. It was not the strongest who survived. It was those who believed in something beyond strength. Those who painted walls, who carved figures, who sang in the night. Those who saw not only what was, but what could be. Against despair, imagination was their shield. Against extinction, it was their light. The sky darkens without warning. The sun, once brilliant, is dimmed to a pale disk behind a veil of ash. Dust settles on the leaves, coats the rivers, chokes the breath. What was once a green valley becomes a grey wasteland, as if the earth itself has exhaled despair. This is no ordinary storm. It is the aftermath of a volcanic eruption, a force so powerful it has flung ash into the stratosphere, blotting out the sun for months, perhaps years. Crops fail, animals die, rivers freeze. The world plunges into a winter not of seasons, but of catastrophe. And in the midst of it, a handful of fragile humans cling to survival, their fires flickering against a darkness that seems eternal. This was the reality our ancestors faced. Sudden disasters that arrived like ghosts in the night, reshaping the world in an instant. Storms, plagues, famines, each carrying the weight of extinction. Against such forces, strength alone was nothing. Only resilience, the ability to adapt, to endure, to seek refuge in one another, kept the fragile spark of humanity alive. Let us walk into one such moment. The volcanic winter of 74,000 years ago, when Mount Toba erupted in what is thought to have been the most powerful eruption of the last 2 million years. The sky filled with ash, the sun dimmed, and temperatures plummeted across the globe. Imagine waking each morning to a sunless sky, the air heavy with dust, the fields barren. The earth itself seemed to have turned against life. In such times, hunger gnawed deeper than ever. Entire groups could vanish within a season, their fires extinguished forever. Yet even then, survival persisted. Families gathered close, rationing scraps of food, chewing roots dug from frozen ground, boiling leather to stave off hunger. They migrated when local resources failed, seeking valleys where rivers still flowed, where fish might still dart beneath the ice. The key was movement, and the courage to leave behind what was familiar in search of the unknown. To stay was to die. To walk was to live, even if every step was shadowed by fear. Consider another enemy, plague. Long before recorded history, disease stalked small communities. A cough spreading through a cave could silence half a group within weeks. A fever moving from one shelter to another could erase entire lineages. Unlike predators or storms, disease was invisible, carried in the body of a loved one, transmitted through a breath or a touch. Imagine the fear of watching a child fall ill, powerless to stop it, knowing others would soon follow. In such moments, despair must have hovered near, but even here, resilience showed itself. Groups learned to separate the sick, to cleanse wounds, to use herbs that soothed pain or reduced fever. Perhaps they did not understand disease as we do, but they recognized patterns, adapted behavior, and passed knowledge forward. A root that eased coughing, a leaf that numbed pain. These small lessons saved lives. And in time, the groups that learned, that remembered, endured where others faded. Famine too carved deep scars. Picture a winter with no herds, a spring with no fruit. Bellies empty, children crying, elders weakened to silence. The temptation was to scatter, each for themselves, but scattering meant doom. Instead, many chose alliance, families merged, clans sought out neighbors, goods and food were shared. One band's hunt might feed another, one group's fire might shelter strangers. Trust was fragile but necessary. In unity, the odds improved, if only slightly. Imagine two groups meeting in the wilderness. They eye each other warily, hands on spears, hunger in their eyes. Tension thickens the air. But instead of fighting, one steps forward with a gift. A hunk of meat, a carved tool, a shell taken from a far-off sea. Slowly, suspicion softens. Fires are joined, stories exchanged. For a time, survival expands from one family to many. In alliances, fragile as they were, lay the seeds of resilience. It is here that contrast reveals itself most starkly. Disasters destroyed, storms flattened forests, plagues cut down families, famine hollowed bodies. Yet at the same time, these very disasters forged strength. They forced movement, creativity, cooperation. Without catastrophe, perhaps humanity would never have spread so far, never have woven the bonds that carried us through. In adversity lay the engine of endurance. We can see echoes of this resilience in genetic evidence. Population bottlenecks, moments when humanity nearly vanished, are written in our DNA. There were times when only a few thousand humans remained on Earth, their survival uncertain. But those few endured, passed their genes forward, and became the ancestors of us all. We are the children of survivors, of those who weathered volcanic winters, who walked through famine, who carried fire across frozen lands. Picture once more a storm, this time not of ash but of ice. The wind screams, snow buries the landscape, animals vanish. In a small shelter of hide and bone, a group huddles. The fire is weak, the food almost gone, but someone begins to sing. The voice is soft, trembling, but steady. Others join. The sound grows, filling the shelter, weaving hope from nothing. The storm rages, but inside, there is a flicker of strength. This, too, is survival. Not just enduring the body's hunger, but feeding the spirit with song, story, and the bond of togetherness. And so, against storms and plagues, against hunger and despair, humanity endured. Not because it was inevitable, but because resilience is not one thing. It is many small acts. The courage to walk when staying meant death, the wisdom to share when hunger urged selfishness, the will to sing when silence seemed easier. These fragile acts, multiplied across generations, became the shield that disasters could not break. We should not imagine this survival as triumph. It was not glorious. It was messy, desperate, uncertain. Many did not make it. Entire branches of the human family tree withered in the storms, their names lost forever. But those who remained carried within them the lessons of disaster, etched into memory, passed through story, carried in blood. They learned that to endure was not to resist change, but to bend with it, to move, to adapt, to ally. This is the paradox of disaster. It threatens to erase, yet it also teaches. It destroys, yet it also forges. Against storms and plagues, against famine and despair, our ancestors did not conquer. They survived, and survival, fragile as it was enough. In every cell of your body lies a thread that stretches back in time. Not a thread you can see or touch, but one written in code. A sequence of molecules wound into the double helix of DNA. It is silent, invisible, but it remembers. It remembers lives lived tens of thousands of years ago. It remembers the migrations across continents, the encounters with other human kinds, the survival of some, and the disappearance of others. Each of us carries within us a genetic story, a record of ancient meetings and ancient resilience. And though we rarely think of it as we go about our modern lives, this story connects us to a deep and fragile past. Once, not so long ago in the measure of time, we believed we were alone, a species that had emerged in Africa and then spread across the globe, displacing all others. The story seems simple, one line of humans, ours, marching forward. But the truth, revealed slowly by science, is more complex, more tangled. We were not alone. The world we entered was already inhabited by others. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans farther east, and perhaps still others we have not yet named. They were strong, clever, and adapted to their lands. And when we met them, we did not always fight. Sometimes we joined. The proof of these unions does not come from stone tools or buried bones alone, but from the code written inside us. When the first Neanderthal genome was sequenced in the early years of this century, scientists compared it to modern human DNA. What they found was astonishing. In people today, outside of Africa, about 1 to 2% of their DNA is Neanderthal in origin. In some individuals, the percentage is slightly higher. It meant that somewhere, perhaps around 60,000 years ago, when humans moving out of Africa encountered Neanderthals, they did more than share the land. They shared their lives. Imagine one such meeting. A valley in what is now the Middle East. A group of modern humans, lean, dark-eyed, wary, moving cautiously along a riverbank. In the shadows of the forest, Neanderthals watch them. Their bodies are broader, their muscles heavier, their faces strikingly different, but not alien. Both groups sense the tension of meeting another kind of human. Similar, yet not the same. Some encounters would end in conflict, in fear and blood. But not all, for in time bonds formed. Partnerships arose, children were born, carrying within them a fusion of two lineages. And through those children, the Neanderthal lineage lives on, not as a separate branch, but as threads woven into our own. The Denisovans too left their mark, though for a long time we did not even know they had existed. Their entire species was discovered not through full skeletons, but from a single finger bone found in a Siberian cave deep in the Altai Mountains. From that small fragment, scientists extracted DNA and discovered a lineage distinct from both Neanderthals and modern humans. When that DNA was compared with ours, the story deepened. In populations today, especially in Oceania, in Melanesia, and in parts of Asia, up to 5% of the genome can be traced back to Denisovans. Once again, the pattern was clear. Meeting, mingling, leaving a legacy. What do these ancient threads mean for us now? They are not just echoes of long-vanished peoples. They carry practical consequences. Some of the Neanderthal genes we carry influence the way our immune systems respond to disease. Others shape how our bodies handle altitude, or how our skin and hair respond to sunlight. From Denisovans, we inherited a remarkable adaptation that allows some populations, such as the Sherpa of the Himalayas, to thrive at extreme altitudes where oxygen is thin. Without this gift from another humankind, survival in such places might have been impossible. This, too, is a contrast worth reflecting on. We often imagine survival as competition, one species triumphing over another. Yet our very DNA tells a softer, more complex story, that survival also came through union, through borrowing strength from one another. The advantages that kept us alive did not come solely from within, but from the blending of lineages. Our ancestors endured because they were not pure, but mixed. They carried within them the resilience of more than one humankind. Still, the Neanderthals and Denisovans themselves disappeared. Their fires went out. Their voices fell silent. Their caves emptied. And yet, in another sense, they are not gone at all. A fragment of their essence walks within us, hidden in our cells. When your body fights an infection, when your lungs draw breath in the thin air of a mountain pass, when your skin responds to the warmth of the sun, you may be echoing an inheritance millions of years old. You may be hearing faintly the survival of another species that lives on only through you. There is something humbling, even soothing, in this realization. We are not the sole survivors of a simple line. We are a tapestry woven from threads of many colors, each thread fragile, each thread shaped by chance meetings and narrow escapes. And though we often speak of Neanderthals as vanished, of Denisovans as lost, perhaps it is better to think of them as transformed, their legacy now inseparable from our own. Science continues to refine this story. New techniques, new discoveries, new comparisons are constantly shifting what we know. It is likely that other lineages, still unnamed, contributed to the mosaic of our DNA. Already there are hints, ghost signals in the genome, patterns that do not match Neanderthal or Denisovan, suggesting unions with yet another branch of humanity, long since gone. Each discovery reminds us that the past is never as simple as we imagine. The story is not of one line alone, but of many threads knotted together, some visible, others only faint traces. Picture once more the image of a thread stretching back through time. It runs through you, through me, through everyone alive today. It is a thread that does not break, but bends, splits, joins, and weaves with others. It is the genetic memory of ancient encounters, written in a code more enduring than stone. When we speak of ancestry, of survival, of resilience, it is not just our species we speak of, but of a family larger and more mysterious than we knew. And so, in the quiet of the present, when we rest and drift towards sleep, it is worth remembering that within each of us is a story millions of years long. That in our blood and bones the past endures. That our survival was never ours alone, but the shared triumph of many. The genetic thread binds us not only to our ancestors, but to cousins whose names are lost, yet whose presence still whispers in our cells. Against extinction, against the silence of time, the thread has held. And because it held, you are here. Close your eyes and imagine again that lone figure on the ancient savannah, small, exposed, fragile. Around them loom creatures of terrible strength. The lion with its claws like knives, the elephant with its towering bulk, the saber-toothed cat with teeth made for rending flesh. Against such powers, what is a human? No horns, no fangs, no shell, no wings. Our ancestors were, by nearly every measure, among the weakest of nature's creations. And yet somehow it was we, who endured. This is the paradox of fragility. Survival did not come because we were the strongest, but precisely because we were not. Fragility forced us to adapt. Weakness forced us to imagine. Vulnerability forced us to gather together, to share, to cooperate, to trust. What we lacked in strength became the seed of what allowed us to outlast far stronger rivals. Think for a moment of the Neanderthals. Their bodies were robust, their bones heavy, their muscles dense. They could withstand cold better, hunt with greater force, endure physical challenges with an ease our ancestors must have envied. And yet, it was not they who carried the story of humanity forward. Their strength, in a world that shifted so quickly, was not enough. Our weakness, fragile though it seemed, was an unexpected kind of power. A power rooted not in the body, but in the mind, the heart, the willingness to change. We can see this paradox even in the simplest of human acts. A child is born helpless, unable to walk, unable to feed itself, dependent for years on the care of others. Among animals, this fragility would be a death sentence. But in humans, it became the foundation of community. Because children demanded care, families stayed close. Because young ones were vulnerable, older ones shared food and shelter. Because each individual could not survive alone, bonds deepened, and cooperation became second nature. Fragility created a web of interdependence that became humanity's greatest strength. Imagine a winter storm, howling winds tearing through a shelter of hide and bone. Alone, no one could endure such cold. But together, pressed close, warmth was shared, fire tended, food passed from hand to hand. Fragility demanded connection, and connection became endurance. The paradox reveals itself again in fear. To be fragile is to be afraid of predators, of hunger, of sickness, of death. Fear is often spoken of as weakness, but in truth, it is a teacher. Fear sharpens the senses, keeps watch at the edge of the firelight, drives the invention of tools and weapons. It was fear that urged our ancestors to look beyond the immediate, to prepare for the coming winter, to carry embers carefully from one camp to the next. Without fear, there would have been no vigilance. Without vigilance, no survival. In fragility lay caution, and in caution lay endurance. Even illness, that great curse of fragile bodies, carried its lessons. The cough, the fever, the pain. Each reminded our ancestors that life was tenuous, that bodies broke easily. Yet it was this very fragility that drove the search for remedies, for herbs and rituals, for ways to ease suffering. Over generations, the knowledge of healing grew, not from strength, but from weakness acknowledged and faced. The fragile body demanded care, and in providing it, humanity deepened its empathy. Contrast this with the predators of old. They were powerful, sleek, magnificent, but their power was narrow, fixed. The saber-tooth was a hunter of great skill, yet when its prey disappeared, its strength became useless. The mammoth was immense, but when climates shifted and food grew scarce, its bulk became a burden. Their strength, unbending, was their undoing. Our weakness, pliable, adjusting, shifting. That was our salvation. It is a truth echoed across the natural world. The rigid branch breaks in the storm, while the reed bends and survives. The brittle rock shatters under pressure, while water flows around obstacles, wearing them down with patience. Fragility, when met with adaptability, becomes a hidden form of resilience. Let us reflect on this in personal terms. Each of us has known moments of weakness. The sickness that lays us low, the grief that bends the heart, the fear that tightens the chest. In such times it is easy to feel small, powerless, fragile. And yet, these moments are often the very ones that shape us most deeply. Illness teaches us the value of health. Grief teaches us the depth of love. Fear teaches us courage. Just as it was for our ancestors, fragility does not end the story. It transforms it. When you think of your own survival, the fact that you are here, listening now, it is not only because of the triumphs of the strong. It is because countless fragile lives across thousands of generations endured despite the odds. Each one vulnerable, each one exposed, each one making choices born of necessity, to flee instead of fight, to join instead of isolate, to imagine instead of despair. Their survival was improbable, yet it happened. And because it happened, you are here. The paradox deepens when we see how fragility gave birth to imagination itself. To be fragile is to know fear. To know fear is to dream of protection, of safety, of worlds beyond the harshness of reality. In the flickering torchlight of caves, fragile humans painted animals larger than themselves, carved symbols, sang songs. These acts did not feed the body, but they fed the spirit. They gave meaning, hope, connection. And meaning is itself a survival tool. A fragile body without purpose may falter, but a fragile body with a story to believe in can endure almost anything. Soothing though it may be, let us not romanticize fragility. It brought suffering, hunger, death. It was never easy, never gentle. But the very weight of its burden shaped the path of humanity. Our ancestors did not transcend fragility. They embraced it, learned from it, made it their ally. And in doing so, they turned weakness into the most enduring kind of strength, adaptability. We are the heirs of this paradox. Within each of us lies the memory of fragility, in the scars of our bodies, in the tenderness of our hearts, in the fears that still haunt us. But we are also the heirs of resilience, of adaptability, of survival against odds. To carry both truths at once is to understand what it means to be human. As you reflect on this, consider the life you lead now. The challenges you face may be different. Storms of a different kind, plagues of a modern world, hungers that are not of the body, but of the soul. Yet the same paradox applies. Your fragility is not the end of you. It is the beginning of transformation. The very things that make you feel small may also be the source of your greatest adaptability. In this, you carry the same improbable victory that your ancestors carried. Across the savannah, through the ice, beyond the storms. And so, as the night deepens and the world grows quiet, let this thought rest with you. That fragility is not failure. It is the proof that you belong to a long line of survivors who made frailty into strength, weakness into endurance, fear into wisdom. You are the continuation of their paradox, the living echo of their resilience. In your veins flows the improbable victory of countless fragile lives, woven together into the miracle of survival. The paradox of fragility is not simply history, it is you. The night is quiet. Above, the stars wheel slowly across the dark, eternal sky. On the ground, a small circle of light flickers, a fire, glowing red and gold, its smoke rising into the cool air. Around it, figures sit close, shoulders brushing, eyes heavy with fatigue yet bright with reflection. The fire crackles softly, and in its warmth we see the story of humanity itself. Fragile flames surrounded by vast darkness yet burning still. This is where our long journey began, and where it returns now, to the fire, to the embers that carried us through ages of danger, hunger, and fear. Every chapter of survival we have traced was lit by this light. The light of cooperation, of imagination, of resilience. Against storms, against predators, against the silence of extinction, these embers endured. And though they seemed fragile, like sparks easily snuffed out, they were strong enough to last across millennia, strong enough to reach this moment, to reach you. Let us return, in imagination, to that very first fire. Picture a group of our earliest ancestors huddled on the savannah. The night is full of sounds, the distant roar of lions, the haunting laughter of hyenas, the whisper of wind through grass. Without fire, the night is terror. With fire, it is transformed. Shadows retreat, warmth spreads, food can be cooked, stories can be told. The fire does not banish danger entirely, but it creates a circle of safety, a fragile promise that life can continue. From that fire onward, the embers passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. Sometimes they were carried in bowls of stone or shells, glowing coals protected carefully through long journeys. Sometimes they were rekindled with sparks struck from flint, coaxed into flame with breath and patience. Always they were tended, never forgotten. Fire became not just survival, but symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest night, light could endure. So too with the other embers of humanity, the ember of cooperation. When food was scarce, when winters were long, survival demanded that humans share, that they form bonds beyond the individual. One could not endure alone, but together, feeding one another, watching over children, protecting the sick. They created a web of care that no storm could easily break. This ember glows within us still, in every act of kindness, every gesture of solidarity, every moment when we choose connection over isolation. The ember of imagination, within the caves of Europe, in Africa's painted rock shelters, on carved bones and etched shells, we see the glow of minds that dreamed beyond necessity. They painted animals with lifelike grace, told stories of spirits and ancestors, created rituals that gave meaning to life and death. This ember too burns in us now, in art and song, in stories we tell, in the very act of remembering our past. Imagination gave survival not just form, but purpose. It reminded fragile bodies that they were more than prey, more than wanderers. They were part of a story larger than themselves, and the ember of resilience. In volcanic winters, in plagues, in famines, our ancestors bent but did not break. They adapted, migrated, learned. They endured not by defying fragility, but by embracing it, by turning weakness into adaptability, fear into vigilance, grief into wisdom. Each disaster carried away many, yet each also taught new lessons, forged new paths. Resilience was not strength in the conventional sense. It was patience, persistence, the refusal to let the flame die out. Now, as we sit by this imagined fire, with the long history behind us, the paradox is clear. Humanity should not have survived. The odds were too steep, the dangers too vast. And yet, through all the darkness, the embers never went out. We are the living proof of that improbable endurance. The warmth you feel in your own life, the bonds of love, the dreams of tomorrow, the quiet strength in hardship, is the same warmth that once kept fragile humans alive beneath the stars. Think for a moment of the countless generations before you. Each one faced nights like this, fears like this, choices like this. Each one carried forward the flame until it reached the present. Without them, there would be no you. Your breath, your heartbeat, your very presence in this world is a continuation of that ancient fire. The embers they tended still glow in you. There is comfort in this continuity. The predators that once roared at the edge of the firelight are gone. The ice sheets have retreated. The storms and famines of the past have passed into memory. Yet the same human spirit that endured then endures now. You are part of a chain unbroken, a thread uncut, a fire still burning. As the night deepens, and as you rest, let these embers soothe you. You do not carry survival alone. You carry it with all who came before and with all who come after. The fragility you sometimes feel is not a flaw, but a connection. The same fragility that shaped humanity into a species of cooperation, imagination, and resilience. In the glow of the campfire, the faces of ancestors blur with your own reflection. Their eyes, tired yet hopeful, meet yours across the centuries. They whisper a truth carried in every ember. We should not have survived, and yet we did. The fire crackles softly. The night is vast, but the embers glow steady, warm, eternal. As you drift towards sleep, let that warmth guide you. Let it remind you that you are part of a story millions of years old, a story of fragility and strength, of fear and hope, of endings and new beginnings. And in the silence beyond words, in the comfort of rest, know that the embers still burn. They always will,